Hi, welcome back to a new video. Today we want to inspect the Geekom Megamini G1 water-cooled or liquid-cooled mini PC. Mini PCs is like a topic, you know. Every day I get 2 to 3 emails from different kind of vendors that want to advertise their mini PCs, and typically, from my perspective, it's just way too boring. But this one comes with full liquid cooling. The specs are a 3900H and an RTX 4060 mobile or laptop GPU. That could be quite interesting, especially with 5.7 liters of volume, which is indeed quite small. Before we take it out of the box, I first want to address the pricing and also the specs of this thing. So currently they're running a Kickstarter campaign, which we'll talk about later. But currently this with the specs of a 3900H, the RTX 4060 mobile, 32 GB of memory and 2 TB SSD is listed with $16.99 US. And after the Kickstarter campaign ends, that's on September 6th, it's going to be increased to $17.99 US. And if you compare this with normal desktop hardware, that's what I did with the Geizhals comparison website. I, for example, just took desktop components like a 14600 because this is running a 3900H. And the 3900H, that's more on Intel's side, is a little bit misleading when it comes to the naming scheme, because you could assume that it's similar to a 3900K, which it's definitely not. A 3900H only has 6 P-cores instead of 8 P-cores, and that's why the 3900H is just very close to a 14600 when it comes to the core configuration. That's also why I picked this as comparison, together with an RTX 4060, the same memory configuration, small mainboard, small case, Arctic water cooling, and then we are about 550 euro, like $600 US cheaper than buying this, which is already quite a lot. But before we judge if that's worth it or not, we obviously have to do the review. Before we opening some of the marketing text from the backside of the packaging, again here we can see the 3900H listed with 14 cores, which is technically correct, but I think splitting in P and E cores would be a little bit better for the consumer, a little bit more transparent. Also not sure what happened here. If there is a special sign, something went wrong with the font, maybe that's something you should check before printing it on a package. Then proven reliability I find kind of interesting. They claim doing high temperature and low temperature tests, not sure what exactly that means. And they also claim that typically Geekom hardware or PCs usually last twice as long as PCs from other brands. Geekom, as they also claim themselves, is an established brand, has been around for several years, which is why I'm asking myself, why are they running a Kickstarter campaign? That's typically something that you would see from maybe a new brand that doesn't have the funds yet to run such a project. But for Geekom, would have been enough to just have a pre-order thing on their website. I'm not sure why they're running a Kickstarter campaign. That's something I personally have a little bit negative vibes to, because I just saw too many cases in the past where things didn't work out as planned. I don't think that this will happen with Geekom because, I mean, the product already exists, which then also, again, raises the question why you would do a Kickstarter campaign, but let me know what you think about it. The RTX 4060 in here is a laptop or mobile GPU, but it's one of the only cards where the desktop and the mobile version is the same. So both feature AD107 GPU, so that's the same for both a normal RTX 4060 and RTX 4060 mobile. Whereas if you would get a 4090 mobile or laptop, it's just not what you would expect versus an RTX 4090 desktop. So that's at least something which is not that confusing. It's indeed quite small, and I think it's pretty hard to judge from the pictures and videos online if you don't have a direct comparison, but if I just put like a pen next to it, like my hand, you can see it's a pretty small PC. Considering that it's water-cooled, first impression, very, very interesting. I have no clue about anything yet, but first impression, very, very interesting. I have to peel off all the protective films, will make it look even nicer. Ouch. Sure. Yeah, so 50% of the logo, or 2/3 of the logo, are stuck to this film, and only one piece is left. And I managed to push part of the logo. Like this piece here was incredibly sharp and just poked into my finger. It's bleeding. Thanks. Fixed. Definitely not a new unit. Must be something like a review unit. Spotted bit of thermal paste on the case. The I/O area is interesting. On the left side we have the PSU connection because it's an external PSU like a laptop, dual USB Type-C, Ethernet, dual USB Type-A, dual HDMI and Oculink, which is I think PCIe Gen 4, 4 lanes, so same as Thunderbolt but just a different connector. I'm not sure what you would use externally. Have to check what kind of devices exist for this. I think it's mainly common in the server market for like SSDs, for example. On the side, we have an SD card connector port if that's necessary. The whole thing, the whole case, by the way, is made out of aluminum. Feels very nice. The quality, build quality from the outside overall is pretty good. We have, I think, power button right here. That should be for hardware monitoring. Here we can see the tubing inside. And from the images online, I wished that they were using hard tubes, but I think it's normal tubing, at least from how the bend looks like. But that's something we will have to check out later once we open it. And in the front we have 4 times USB Type-A and audio jack. I think like this you will get a better impression of how small it is. It's also fairly light, weight-wise, pretty good for a liquid-cooled system. This is the PSU included, 330 watt output power, which is similar to just a big notebook PSU, and that's also what essentially we have inside. It is notebook hardware. Both the CPU, GPU and everything. We will try to take it apart, but we have basically a liquid-cooled laptop without a screen. That's how we can summarize this entire project. What we want to inspect now is the marketing claim from Geekom, or the claims that they have on their website, also on Kickstarter, to see what are they even advertising. Like, what is the target group of this thing and what is it good for? The online marketing on the Geekom website and Kickstarter website is, for this kind of vendor, I would say it's pretty wild. It's odd. They advertise the world's smallest Genesis gaming PC, and what the hell is a Genesis gaming PC? I don't even know. At the time shooting this video, the Kickstarter campaign has 429 supporters with a volume of 624,000 euro. So that's about 1,500 euro per person. They advertise ultra-quiet liquid cooling and dual industrial grade fans. That is something we will inspect for sure. At the same time also they have real-time performance monitoring screen system. So that's the small screen that's built in the front to monitor your hardware specs and maybe temperature, load, whatever. The marketing slide comparing the Megamini G1 with other PCs is interesting. We have ultra-quiet liquid cooling system, highly efficient heat dissipation, whereas other PCs are inadequate for heavy tasks, overheating under load, of course, and noisier operation. My favorite, as usual, the Megamini G1 supports over 240 AI tools for advanced workflows, whereas other typical PCs only have minimal AI functionality and lack optimization. The Megamini G1 is optimized for gaming, video editing, 3D rendering and more, whereas other PCs are limited to specific application and are less versatile. That all doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it's laptop hardware and apparently it is much better for like video editing and 3D rendering than any other PC. That is a claim that I don't really believe. And running 240 AI tools, what does that even mean? And other PCs, I mean, if it's Windows and software, they will just run exactly the same. Out of all those claims, I think the most important in the end is the ultra-quiet liquid cooling system for high heat dissipation, because that's the only reason why you would get a liquid-cooled system. Liquid cooling should allow to run, for example, fans at a lower speed versus a normal air cooler. Otherwise, it wouldn't make much sense to get it. At this point, I'm missing the ultra-quiet operation. When I started it, I could hear the pump. The noise of the pump is probably still there, but I can't hear it. I think the fan is running 100% fan speed. Not sure if the fan control, whatever. Why is my screen talking Russian to me? Yeah, Let's see if there's a fan control I can find somewhere. This is very loud right now. The water cooling system is interesting. Also the amount of air that is still inside might be because it's the first run. I'm not sure if there's a reservoir that will get the air out over time. I will just keep it running and then we will find out. Also, I'm still not sure if I'm looking at soft tubes or hard tubes. It's very hard to tell. The hardware display is quite nice. I like things like that where you have easy, just a look of what your components are doing, especially during load. So you have CPU, GPU, memory, and then an overview of all the three things. Did I just read correctly that it's displaying 70 GB of memory? To wait. Yeah, something must be wrong here. It's telling me 11% of 70 GB. That's can't be correct, right? I'm just installing and setting up everything, and I noticed opening GPU-C that this is reading out 8106. I think earlier I said 8107, but this is 8106. Still, this is a GPU version that exists as a desktop GPU as an RTX 4060. The fan speed is driving me crazy. That is annoying as hell. And I'm trying to find something in BIOS to adjust the fan speed. The only thing I can spot is power mode, which I can set from normal to quiet mode. It's claiming to lower the fan speed, which I will have to find out, but at least in Windows there is no software or anything to adjust anything. This sounds a lot better. Think like the quiet mode helped. Prior to adjusting it, it was 45 watt PL1 and I think 115 or 110 for PL2. Now it's much lower, but yeah, there is no way I can review the normal mode. It's just way too loud. While I'm still downloading some games to test, we can enjoy the very annoying pump noises. Time for benchmarking. R23 is running and PL2 currently is supplying 55 watt to the CPU, which is, as I said before, it's not a lot. And it results in low temperatures. That is the benefit. It's very low power consumption, thus also very low temperatures. But at a certain point now, probably PL1 will kick in, limiting the CPU to 35 watt. That is what we could see right here. So even less power supplied to the CPU, even less temperatures. So that is the positive side of things, even lower thermals. But 35 watt will limit the performance of the CPU quite drastically, at least in R23 heavy multi-threading. This results in only 12,400 points, which is, as far as I remember, roughly the region of a 9900K, which is a few generations older. That is not impressive. I just switched back to normal mode in BIOS because I thought I want to compare the performance anyway, even though it might be loud, but the fan didn't ramp up anymore. That is cool. I'm not sure why. I didn't change anything else. Not sure if that's a bug in the BIOS, but it seems to be fixed. We are rerunning R23. The CPU will be able to utilize higher power. As you can see, PL2 now 115. It is drawing 115, but the tau value is a little bit low. You can see after a few seconds, it goes immediately back down to 45 watt after, I don't know, like 3 or 5 seconds. I'm not even sure why that is the case. The CPU, it is cold. It is between 70 and 77 degrees Celsius. That is a good region. Not sure why it directly goes back down to 45 watt. That's like unnecessary from my point of view. And there is something weird going on with the memory. I'm not sure why this is happening. I double checked with CPU-C as well. You can see some clock fluctuation from 2400, which would be 4800 megatransfers DDR5. It goes often down to 1000, which is only 2000 megatransfers. Maybe you know what is going on here, but yeah, that's probably also limiting performance quite a bit. It seems to be going up and down in some power saving mode or something, but under load, that should not happen. I will now try to adjust things with Intel XTU, see if I can adjust power limits. Seems to be possible, maybe even the turbo power window, and that might help us to get more performance out of the CPU. We will just try 300 watts, much more wouldn't make much sense. I'm not even sure if the CPU can utilize that much, but above wouldn't even work because of the PSU being only 330 watt. Rerunning with the high power limits, you can see it was indeed applied So you can also see it on here. CPU doesn't utilize as much as expected, but 123 watt the CPU is pulling right now, and it's not stopped by PL1 or like a time limit. The temperatures are in an absolute okay region, still maybe 80 degrees Celsius on average under load. That I think is absolutely okay, considering that in most of the notebooks, the 3900H under load with air cooling will run into higher temperatures than this. I think this should give us much better performance than before. And we're closing in on 18,000 points. In the German take, I actually had 18,000 points. So yeah, we're losing a lot of performance because of the power limit restriction. It should be no problem, according to the specs, that we extend the device by another SSD. At least that's what they claim. And I will want to have my second SSD in there because I have my testing games on it. And before I do that, I want to run 3D Mark to see what kind of GPU temperatures we have under load before we open and adjust and change anything that could affect the thermals. I first thought I have to revert the power limits to stock, as they are still set to 305, but you can see the CPU is only pulling like 20 watt, which is an indicator that is like a GPU limited scenario. Not sure why it is that heavily GPU limited. We have 55 degrees Celsius, 130 watt on the GPU, and we had just lower GPU clocks than what you would have typically on a desktop GPU, which I think is caused by the restricted power draw. In the CPU test, however, the CPU again, as expected, is pulling more power. This is more than what it would do stock, because we're still running unlocked PL1 and PL2. The result is 4,900 points in Times Extreme, and that is, at least in the graphics score, that is also what is expected from a desktop GPU. Geekom also provided this presentation of the entire PC, where they even have a 3D Mark Times Extreme inside, and they also have 4,900 points in the graphics score. So yeah, it's just in line with what they also tested themselves. The only difference though is that we have 6,500 points in the CPU score, but Geekom only had 2,200 points because the power limit kicked in so badly. Now that it has been running for a few hours, I can say that the coolant and the air inside the coolant, this kind of problem didn't change at all. There is still a huge amount of air circulating all the time. I left it on the desk for like an hour or two. It didn't change anything. And also like swapping or like moving it, it didn't change anything. I couldn't get the air out. It's still circulating a lot of air. Maybe that is also causing this pump noise. That is still extremely annoying. I would not have this next to me on the desk. It's annoying. The pump is too loud. The fan is fine in this state now, but the pump is absolutely annoying. Time to open it, see if we can install the SSD, if that's even possible, and how this entire cooling concept is made. We have to talk about this hardware monitoring display. I'm running R23. Pay attention to CPU utilization. It's 135%. Yeah, I'm not sure who did the math, but yeah, it definitely does not work out. In the manual, they also detailed how to open it. We'll just try that right now. It's not very user-friendly that you have to remove the feet, because underneath they placed the screws and they're glued in, so that's not really convenient. There's one M2 SSD here, 2 TB. Here are the 2 memory modules. There is an empty M.2 slot. Unfortunately, it doesn't support a full-size 2280 M.2 SSD, which is odd. I mean, probably they thought it didn't have enough space with the battery. With a longer cable, they could have put the battery here. But now, there is this pin that doesn't allow me to put a normal-sized M.2 SSD inside as addition. Yeah, too bad. Removed the DIMMs, also the M.2 SSD, because I spotted screws underneath. I think they are mounting the motherboard to the water cooler that I can spot underneath. And underneath is probably the GPU in like a sandwich type of assembly. Indeed, the motherboard with the CPU in the center, VRM on top, covered with thermal paste, and here is the water block. Very interesting motherboard. They definitely spend a lot of time on that. It's nothing you would find in any typical other gaming PC or even a notebook. Fully custom made just for these PCs. Here we have what I assume is an MXM GPU RTX 4060 with the water block still in place. And I guess those two cables are carrying the PCIe signal to the motherboard. I spotted that the screws that are there or should be there to hold the PCB, they're missing. I assume somebody else opened it before. You can see also here the screw that is supposed to hold the PCB, the MXM PCB in place, is not there. Not really a problem because it will still be held by the GPU, but it's just a small quality aspect. This is how small you can make an RTX 4060. That is pretty insane. There are a lot of things you can say about the system, being loud, advertising, maybe weird, but they definitely spent a good amount of time developing this thing. There's a good amount of time that went into all of this. Making a water block that cools the CPU from one side and then this very tiny GPU from the other side. Very, very interesting. Anything that comes down to maintenance and upgradability, well, you can't upgrade it anyway, apart from memory and SSD, that's basically it. But there's so many screws, so much stuff, so many cables you have to remove to get it down to maybe the water cooling, but it's not easy to do anything in there. I have not much faith that I would be able to put it all back together with all the cables. This must also be a nightmare to assemble. Holy crap. But I want to figure out if those are tubes or hard tubes, like soft or hard tubes. I found a tiny hole. I can reach all the way down. You can see I can push in. It's flexible. So those are tubes. It's not hard tubes. It took me over an hour to put everything back together. This thing is an absolute maintenance nightmare. It is because it is designed this way. And the engineering behind it, I have to say, is quite impressive for, you know, this special motherboard and the cooling, and then the MXM GPU, which is also contributing to the price, because definitely an RTX 4060 in MXM standard is nothing easy to find and it's gonna be expensive. That will explain why it is $1,800 once it is after the Kickstarter campaign. There are a lot of features we have to talk about. First off, the screen on top. I like the feature, but it's just, yeah, it's just displaying wrong information. There is I think a comma missing for the memory. So when we earlier saw like 70 gigabyte of memory, I think it was supposed to say 7.0. So that is apparently missing. Then the CPU utilization is just wrong. Not sure how this is calculated. You cannot adjust anything. So that has to be fixed. And then overall, the liquid cooling solution is concerning. You see all the air just constantly flowing through. And I also saw this in other videos of other people reviewing it. So that's not just my unit. There's a lot of air circulating constantly. So a lot of air going through the pump, which is usually not great. And that is also what is causing the noise. Talking about noise, you can hear that the fan is back up running at 100% fan speed. So that happens anytime you switch it on. I have to go back into the BIOS. I have to go to quiet mode. Apply it, have to go back to quiet BIOS, then apply the normal mode, and then the fan is fixed. So there's something bugged with the fan speed curve. I'm pretty sure you can still fix it, but I mean, why does it show up here like this? Somebody must have tested this and figure out that it's always running 100% fan speed. Can't really understand that factor. So if the fan is running at an appropriate fan speed, if it's quiet, then there is still the pump making a lot of noise. Probably also because of the air that is constantly being circulated in the entire loop. And that's concerning in multiple aspects. First of all, it's causing noise and it's not good for the pump. And there's probably just a lack of pockets that could keep the air somewhere, like a reservoir. There's like a reservoir missing, which means that after a long time, after some water diffusing through the tubing, because it's soft tubing, then you will lose water. What is going to happen? Will we have even more air inside? Will the noise become worse? Not quite sure about it. So there are too many factors, in my opinion, that just totally point against buying this. It's first of all the price, because for $1,800 you can just get a much better system. It won't be as small, it won't look as fancy and special, because that is what this system is about. It looks absolutely nice. I love how it looks. It's a great design. I love the tubing inside. I wish they went for hard tubing, because it also looks like the tubing is always about to, to have this, I'm not sure how it's called in English, but like buckling, or I'm not sure if that's the correct word, but yeah, I think with hard tubing it would have looked nicer, and just generally there's too much about it that for me personally is pointing to not buy this, don't buy it. It's okay if you want to get this for whatever reason because you like the design and that it's being special, but the price is too high. There are too many problems about it from my perspective, even though it looks pretty cool. The performance is also an issue because we run a 13900H that is running at a very reduced power consumption, then bottlenecking potentially the RTX 4060 because it's like half or like a third of the performance of a normal desktop CPU that you would have from like Intel or AMD. So there's too many things why it just doesn't make sense to buy it. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Bye bye.